Hello, welcome everybody. I'm super excited to be back for another edition of our podcast, and we're taking a look at a really neat article today. Joining us today, we've got Sara Hanson, Heather Pressler, and Jeffrey Carlson, and we'll be talking more about their recent JA article titled "The Differential Impact of AI-salient on Advertising Engagement and Attitude: Scary Good AI Advertising." It's a very topical and very relevant article to take a look at today, so thank you all for being here today to tell us more about it.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Of course, yeah. So let's dive right in. So for people who may not have had a chance to take a look at this article, may not have heard about it yet, what is it that you go through and investigate in this one?
Yeah, sure. So the focus of the article is really about this concept of AI salience, which is the degree to which consumers perceive an ad to be generated by AI. We operationalize that as either disclosing that the ad is created by AI or that it has imagery or characteristics that are clearly AI generated. So we all kind of know the weird fingers and the kind of glazed over thing. My daughter was just looking at some ads with me yesterday, and she could easily point out which ones she thought were AI generated, and she's 7. So yeah, so the paper is really kind of our hypothesis was around this AI salience and that it kind of goes in two directions with KPIs. So AI stimulates conversation. So we look at that in terms of like likes and comment lengths. So people are willing to have a conversation, but they're not willing to take that next step of conversion and have a negative ad attitude. So we look to theory around reactance and fear to explain that.
Oh, super cool. Yeah, I love this concept of AI salience you put forward. I think it's a really important one. Yeah.
Thanks.
So can you tell us more about how you go through and investigate that? A really important question, really important new concept as well.
Yeah, sure. So we have 4 studies in the paper. We have a couple of process studies, so pretty controlled experiments where we're looking at fear and reactance and demonstrating that in a couple of different contexts, like within the beauty field and within healthcare. So demonstrated across different contexts, and then also are looking at some actual AI generated advertising by a very popular brand. And so are using sentiment analysis to look at those comments and can show and replicate basically the same effects that we see in the controlled experiments. So I think what was kind of interesting about the way that we started the paper was around also kind of the intuitive thoughts that consumers had. So that was where our first study was just to kind of see if our hypothesis around fear and negative emotion was a valid way to start. And, did indeed find that, you know, alarm and hesitance is more associated with AI than things like hope and happiness. So,
Okay, so you find that, consumers are just generally sort of put off by AI generated ads?
yeah. And I think what we found, in addition to just put off, but actually like fearful, um, which makes sense. I think, research has shown that people are generally fearful of new technology. So, we'll talk more about future research that we see, but I think there's, you know, it'll be interesting to see how over time and how people become more familiar with AI, whether these kind of effects will dampen, or if as, it becomes more sophisticated, that fear kind of maintains. So, yeah.
Interesting, yeah. So what does this mean? What does this mean for marketers then? People generally don't like this. Like, is there hope? Should we be doing this? Should we not be doing this? How do we put this together? Yeah,
So I'll field that question. I think
very
from a
appropriate.
yes, I think from working with clients and how this applies to advertising itself, some of the things that we were looking at in the study was understanding how, depending on what your KPI is for that particular ad set or goal or the campaign, is understanding how AI affects each one. So how it affects conversions, how it affects engagement, right? Because what we found in the study was that AI was stimulating conversation on some of these advertisements. However, it was less likely to generate a conversion. And so that's where, advertisers really have to be careful about what the KPIs are really telling you with the type of advertising you're doing and with the AI that you're using for that advertising. I think some other things to also think about is the application of AI along the customer journey. So, depending on, is this top of funnel, middle of funnel, bottom of funnel, how does AI affect the consumer in those different key places? in their journey with your brand and understanding your brand. Um, and then finally, I think, thinking carefully about the AI disclosures that you have as an advertiser and how salient that will be, like the AI that you're using, and then framing the disclosure. Does that affect, again, how people see the advertisement, how they understand how you're using AI? Those are all some things that we saw and we were looking at in the study. And then I think just in working since we published the study and I work every day with clients, some of the things I've been seeing is that I got very strong pushback from some clients in um, not wanting to use AI at all in their advertising.
Mm.
And whether that was their personal like connection to AI or some of the things that they were getting feedback from their other consumers that were looking at the advertising. And I've seen then that the powers to be, whether it's Meta, Google, et cetera, have started to change how they also are integrating AI in advertising now as well too, perhaps because they also were seeing that feedback from ad agencies, from customers and consumers as well too.
That's interesting. Yeah. So yeah, I know you mentioned like conversions, going down and engagement being up in some cases as well. So does this seem like that it's a better fit then for more top funnel activities versus like bottom funnel, or like is there a better location, or is it still sort of unclear, or
So that wasn't included in our study, but potentially for some future studies is looking at just specifically, yeah, in the different parts of the funnel, do we see better engagement in some? My gut as an advertiser would be AI may not be the first impression you want of someone for your brand, right? So the more top of funnel, but maybe there's some ways in which we can use AI as someone moves further down into the funnel to help us have better conversions or better engagement with them.
Oh, okay, yeah. And I'm guessing this is like, because you looked at like AI-salience as the main driver here, right? So I'm guessing that if the AI-salience is quite low, like if it's a really high quality piece of AI, then perhaps it's less of an issue. Would that be the case, or?
Yeah, absolutely. I could see that if you have a more sophisticated application of AI, like if your AI functions more as a Photoshop than it does as this is a completely different human being that we're creating out of AI,
Right.
um, then the consumers that maybe have learned to identify AI have a harder time where they think it's just an image that's bright and cheery rather than, oh, that's clearly AI that's been applied to that image. Yeah, I think that it really that salience factor comes into play where if you can find the right balance for your consumer and your target audience and then the level of funnel that you're at, you're finding maybe that right balance between you're getting more engagement because it's an appealing image versus the you've gone too far that you get the fear reaction kicking in.
Yeah, that's interesting, right? So balancing the positive of it, the personalization or the, creativity that comes with it with the, the creepiness or right, or the fear that is evoked by it. Yeah. Interesting.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. So I always like to ask this question as well too. Where did the idea come for this? And like I'm wondering, was it motivated by what you're seeing with clients, Heather, or was it coming from somewhere else or
Yeah, so it was great. I was connected through social media to Sarah, and Sarah and I had a first initial conversation together. And long story short is I'm a researcher from a different specialty. So I was a scientist before I became an advertiser.
oh cool.
And
Yeah.
so I was really interested in the science of what she and Jeff do. And so we started a conversation and I was asking her about her research and some of the things she was seeing. And that was really right around the time that AI was starting to be used in a much wider audience. And then we saw the call for articles from JAR or Sarah had seen it somewhere.
Yeah.
And she was like, hey, there's this, call for more research on AI. And I was like, you know what? People are asking me to play around with it from a advertising standpoint. I'd be happy to, work with you all on this. And then it kind of flowed from there. I started being served some ads that included AI material that had a lot of comments because it was a national brand that was using it. And so I sent it over to the team, and we were like, wow, this is a gold mine of interesting engagement. And then can we do our own experiments based off of that? And I will just say that I was like absolutely honored to work with them to see the science of marketing. That it was just an incredible experience for me as a scientist to see the science of a different industry. So I will say the rest of it they took and ran with 100%. But I was so happy to be along this journey and the idea of the project.
That's fantastic. I'm so glad you got that connection and going, and hopefully it's the first of many articles you'll do. Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome. Another question I always like to ask is about challenges. I think especially for more junior researchers, we get a lot of PhD students or junior researchers who see articles come out and they go, "Well, it looks so perfect and amazing when it's in print," and we often don't talk about the challenges behind it. So I'm always curious, were there any, and if so, how did you overcome those?
Yeah, and I'm happy to jump in on that one. And I do want to add a note though. I think the feeling is mutual, Heather. I think moving forward, I don't want to do future research without having your absolute awesome practitioner perspective. So that I think that's just a perfect marriage when you think about teams of researchers. Colin, to go back to your question, I mean, you have an evolving technology that's changing. I think every other week it seems like, and it's moving quick. So we had to move on this paper surprisingly quick. I think that is a challenge, is to be able to keep up with that change in nature. We did have confidence, though, that there was convergence in the results of our studies as it moved forward. So that was great. But then I think probably the biggest challenge that we had was, and I actually just saw this, I don't know if it was Gallup or another media reported this, participants pretty much thought AI was being used, even if it wasn't. So in the end, our tests
Wow.
are pretty conservative, if we look at it from that perspective. So that is most definitely a challenge when you're trying to design experiments and no matter what, they're converging at the midpoint. So that is something that we had to deal with. Beyond that, and Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong. I think we go into that world of alternative explanations. I think for a split second, I want to say I was convinced that curiosity played a role, not fear. But I think we ruled that out at least, and we found that indeed it was fear. So yeah, we kind of went through the classic considering alternative explanations, trying to take into account that, wow, I mean, there are a lot of folks out there that think AI is at play, whether it is or not, but we got through them. We're pretty happy about this.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
fantastic.
I think the reviewers also, as I recall, had really good feedback and help with how to kind of tease that apart, given that the manipulation check when
Yeah.
people are assuming something when you're trying to check it. Um, they suggested checking different levels, so that was something that we added on a next round. So I think that was really helpful too. But I think, yeah, Jeff and I often talk about how this is one of our fastest papers just because the results were that solid that we could know that as we would conduct more experiments, they would just fall into line. So that's that kind of the beauty of this paper, I think, is that we were both like, wow, this is really going great. So maybe that's not the best advice for junior researchers, but I think for me, it's like, you know, you try something a couple times and sometimes it's really hard to leave it behind, but I think this one like we really knew that it was something important and something we were finding really reliable results, so that was good.
That's awesome. I guess when you have a solid effect, right, it just comes through very, very nicely. Yeah.
Mhm.
So other one as well too is of course like where to next. So I'll have to admit as well, I've been doing some like work in Gen AI as well too recently, and I was doing literature review and I came across this paper came up as well, and AI-salient, I love it. I was reminded of that, and I was like, this is such an important construct. So I think there's a lot of potential places to take this, but I'm curious as to where you folks think it's most needed.
Sure, I can start just with some of the things that we have discussed. So I think what would be interesting moving forward is I think Heather hinted to it a bit around advertisers and the way that they're adopting kind of disclosures around AI versus how brands adopt that. So I think it's important to conduct some future research around kind of who do I attribute the responsibility to? Is it the platform itself? Is it the brand? Um, I would assume that if the platform or the advertiser is owning the disclosure, owning like this is part of our process, then maybe the brand won't be as affected. So I think kind of the ownership of the disclosure and or the motivation behind the disclosure would be something important to explore. Um, That was just a first thought. Happy to let others chime in.
Well, yeah, and I've been thinking about this a lot, and I alluded to it earlier. I think when you have a new thing that keeps changing so rapidly, I'm genuinely curious about how these results will potentially change. Will consumers become
Mm,
more trustful as AI as it improves in quality? I think we were talking about that earlier. So I think this is just a topic where, assuming that AI is going to keep on this growth pattern, just seeing what those results are. And I think the other spot that I find interesting in, because I love it when you find some strong effects across different conditions, but I think where my mind always kind of spins is, well, where are the exceptions to that? Are there folks that could
mm.
generate the opposite emotion? Are there folks that could actually kind of flip the script and you find that there's some positive reactions to it? Is it because it's perhaps a powerful brand, a powerful persona? So I think there's a whole probably another avenue where you could kind of go into those conditions that change these results.
Yeah, that would be definitely interesting to look at as well. Yeah.
I think I'm always interested to see when the systems start to respond to what they're finding as well too, right? So what I alluded to in my earlier comment was um, after we published the study, both Meta and Google made big changes to some of the AI that they were incorporating in their advertising that was natively available to researchers or advertisers, I should say. And with Meta, I saw them go very far in one direction where it was you could generate an AI image, you can generate the AI text, like you don't have to have any human input whatsoever in the ad. I'm seeing that on Google now as well too, where you can actually flip a switch that says you're allowing AI to have more control over the advertising, whether it's images or text, and maybe not even seeing it before it goes out, which I don't know how that would work with large companies that need that approved. But then I also have seen it swing back, at least with Meta, where they're not as encouraging people to use the AI generated images, the ones that are very obviously AI generated. But now they're moving towards this model where there's like personas, like you were alluding to earlier too, where, okay, let me help you with crafting the same message that either a human or another AI has written that then goes after different personas that you may be trying to target. So now it's more of an assistive. And we didn't dive into in our study the text or the language learning models,
Mm.
AI and the salience of that. So those are all, again, I think as this continues, as Jeff said, as this continues to evolve on these different platforms, understanding what that means for advertisers, what that means for their audience, and how maybe there are better ways of using AI to get better responses, and not necessarily triggering the fear response with those uses as well.
Yeah. No, it's definitely a very evolving and exciting area. Like I feel like there's new tools coming out almost every week now. It's crazy.
It's very interesting. And I'm also very interested in some things that we've been seeing coming through ChatGPT, which is not covered in this current study, right? But I hear their advertising is coming for them in 2026 potentially. So that might be
Oh,
another,
cool. Yeah.
yeah, another interesting evolution.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to come and talk more about your new article. Again, for those who are interested, it's called The Differential Impact of AI-salient on Advertising Engagement and Attitude, Scary Good AI Advertising. And it's by Sara Hanson, Jeffrey Carlson, and Heather Pressler. So thank you again for all coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Colin. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for having us.
Awesome. And